Hi everyone, so welcome to our new mobility talk. We are really pleased to have you all on board for this new format of events. We've organized 2 weeks ago our last mobility talk with Deloitte, and today I'm really pleased to organize this new event with Michael from Labbox and with Shotl, Via and Ioki. So just a few words to introduce the event. We're going to have two parts. The first one with our three leading speakers explaining more use cases regarding demand responsive transit, because it is clear that COVID opened the ways to new opportunities for demand responsive transit. And for the second part, we're going to move on a Zoom session only reserved to Mobility Club members to deep dive into the topics and maybe to go further with our speakers. So, Michael, please, if you want to start the introduction.
Sure. Thank you, Adélaïde, and glad to be here. Some of you might know that this is the third time we are trying to attend to have this session. As we had planned it before COVID time. Then we were very enthusiastic, hoping we could reschedule it, a few weeks later, and then we had to reschedule it again. This time, going for a virtual event. I'm going to start just to touch base on two topics. So first, who we are with Labbox, and then the second one, why we really like this topic on on-demand shuttle. So in the first part, Labbox is a Belgian startup studio. It's a bit of a sister company of Via ID, who we got to know already, few years ago, and where the relationship stayed very, very close in the last few years. We are also focusing on the future of mobility, having today 8 different portfolio companies active in various fields of new mobility. We have mobility as a service app focusing on B2B. We have a vehicle sharing company active in B2C, another one in B2B, and so on. And every time we're trying to basically set up or acquire companies in specific fields of mobility. Always starting on the Belgium market, but focusing as well afterwards on other countries. We really liked this topic of on-demand, and so when we discussed with Via ID to set up a session together with Labbox, we really pushed for that topic. Why? Because it's close to two subjects very important to us. The first one is the first or last mile connections, which we feel is sometimes very necessary to have a real change in mobility behavior. Typically in Belgium, we have a lot of company cars, as some of you might know, and we're trying to change that paradigm and getting to more and more new mobility. But what we perceive sometimes is that to have an actual change in company behavior, you really needed an on-demand transit solution, because, for instance, the headquarters of a company would be 2 or 3 kilometers from an actual train station. Therefore, employees were just used to come always with company cars, because the public transport would not be frequent or reliable enough to do this last mile connection between the closest train station and the side of the company. And it's an area where typically we're already active today with one of our portfolio company to bridge that gap. But we believe more is needed, and without this on-demand option, there are many companies who actually cannot change their mobility behavior. So that's the first reason why we really believe it's a key topic. And then the second reason is because we are a strong believer in public and private partnerships. And when we did the acquisition of one of portfolio company active in that space, one of the objectives was really to try to provide a solution to work together with public transport operators. We have 4 of them in Belgium. To really try to develop, jointly solutions that could come as a complement to, bus lines or train lines and so on. As sometimes you need this type of technology to offer a better, let's say, alternative and a more efficient alternative. If you look at the amount of money being spent by the Belgian state versus the mobility options given to the citizens. And so it's really strongly something we believe in. We believe, like, public transport remains like the backbone of mobility, but we believe together with private players, we can try to set up complement in order to achieve a change in mobility pattern. So I'm now going to leave the floor to our next speaker, but I'm glad to reconnect afterwards. Offer if some of you want to discuss any of those topics with us. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Gérard, it's your turn. Thanks.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank Shehadeh for having us here. My name is Gérard Martret. I'm the co-founder at Shotl. I believe I'm on control of the PowerPoint right now. Yeah, looks like it. Good. All right. So if we look for the description of mobility on a dictionary, we find that it is the ability to move or to be moved freely and easily. If you compare that with the description of transportation, transportation is the action of transporting someone or something, or the process of being transported. Now, the question we like to ask ourselves at Shotl is transportation always providing mobility? It happens if you live in a large city where 1/3 of Europeans live. As we know, public transportation in big cities or city centers is structured around fixed lines and rigid schedules to provide a good service to a large number of people. But as soon as we start moving to the outskirts, its frequency and the capillarity starts to decline. Now, the situation in the suburbs, towns, and villages is even worse, which is where 2/3 of Europeans live. Now, these are areas where seniors that don't drive, children, teenagers, young adults without a car, adults with no driving license, disabled citizens, they all have very few options, and sometimes they have no options. And similar thing happens in corporate areas where bus services must respond to essential needs, depending on high subsidies, which sometimes ends up being canceled. Now, in many cases, corporations must solve their mobility challenges in very expensive ways. So how could we solve the lack of mobility in areas with infrequent public transportation and very high dependence? In our case, to tackle this problem, we have developed a platform that empowers public transportation operators, cities, and corporations to deploy flexible, on-demand mobility services through a network of vans and minibuses. Now, Shotl consists of a passenger app, a driver app, and a management module. And the core part of it is the back end and all the set of algorithms that enable the matching of passengers and the routing of vehicles. Passengers insert their pickup and drop-off locations, they request a ride, and they get the accurate information on pickup time and estimated time arrival. Once confirmed, they must walk to a pickup stop. It's a stop that's nearby their location, to meet the driver and to join the ride all the way to the final destination. Drivers must follow the directions that are set in their tablet or smartphone and indicate every time a passenger has been picked up or has been dropped off. We started 3 years ago deploying our first product on one single minibus in our hometown, Sant Cugat, in the suburbs of Barcelona. Now, this slide should be animated, but I'll guide you through it. After that, we started in another suburb called Valirana. I'll tell you a little bit about it in a moment. The third deployment was in Finland, connecting the town of Oulu with Kello. Then what became the biggest deployment, a major car manufacturer and one of the largest factories in Germany, a fleet of 15 vans moving hundreds of office workers every day. And next, the neighborhood of Torre Baró in Barcelona. Our growth continued to France, Portugal, Italy, Switzerland, the UK, and finally Japan. But let me show you the early results of our first version of the product. Although this was a very simplified version of what we have today, it was the first time that we measured the impact of a demand-responsive service compared to the previous model. So we like to show it. We have a hilly residential area, 150 kilometers of streets, and one single minibus. This is what's known as the usual nightmare of the local transportation planner, who needs to answer the questions, where should the bus go through and how often should it stop? Now, the previous option was quite creative. 4 different bus lines operated by one single vehicle. First hour in the morning, first row of the green line from 7:50 until 8:20 a.m. Then the first and second row of the purple line from 8:25 to 10:15. Next, the first row of the orange line to become later the green line again at 10:50. Anyway, seems complicated. But it was actually the easiest way for users to understand. Now, our solution consisted in designing a cloud of 86 virtual bus stops, 36 more than the previous network, and establish a flexible demand responsive service with no fixed routes and no schedules. Just one vehicle moving freely around town. 3 months later, results were great. We had reduced the average waiting time from 75 minutes to 13 minutes. And although we added 30 more kilometers to the daily route, the number of users went from 20 to 60 every day. As all deployments that we generate, that we have generate very valuable data. So we extract and share with our client visual reports containing OD matrices, hotspots, common traits, or exceptionalities that need to be addressed. Now, another case that I'd like to show you today is the example of a corporate solution that is more recent. This is the International Airport of Munich. And I'm going to try something. Instead of me describing the case, I wanted to show you a video that should speak by itself. So let's see if the system works.
Well, we felt the need for improved employee mobility here at the airport area, and we have a very old system of more or less rentable cars, but they're always fully booked. They are never fully utilized though, and so we felt that it's necessary for our employees to be able to move around the campus in an innovative, fast and also convenient way.
We only have a few pool cars, and we always have to go to other bureaus to have meetings or to meet somebody. And now this is a perfect idea that you don't have to start your own car. You just call the Shotl Me and you're being brought to all kind of meetings you want.
Munich Airport contacted us to have this service in place. They wanted to have a complete transportation system for the employees to take them from one location to another. It's a big extension, and this was a way to do it very efficiently with a very small number of vehicles. It was a very exciting project for us. We did everything to make it run as good as possible, but it's been a great success from day one, a lot of users, and we are also very excited to see it growing in the near future.
Den finde ich echt gut für unseren Campus, um mal an entlegene Stellen zu kommen, wo man sonst nur zu Fuß hinkommt oder mit dem Auto, was man sich dann reservieren muss. Das ist doch quasi Verbindung, Leben im Auto, und man trifft immer neue Kollegen, die man dann einfach mal auf einen kurzen Plausch kennenlernt, vielleicht auch einen gemeinsamen Termin fährt, was man dann erst im Auto erfährt. Das ist einfach ein Vorangehen am Campus, neue Mobilität ausprobieren, egal ob das jetzt ein Shuttle ist oder vielleicht auch zukünftig irgendwas anderes.
There's more cost efficiency and the vehicle utilization is much higher if you only use 3 vans, but can possibly move even more people than with the 70 cars we use. And on the other hand, it's way faster because we do not need to search for a parking spot. We do not need to get the keys. We do not need to do anything. We just book on the app, hop into the car and get shuttled where we want to be. Every bigger company campus, company area, every airport that has spread out buildings with different people working at different spots can use such a service. And I think that's really a good model for it.
Good. Now, trying to return to my presentation. Good, thank you. So besides Munich Airport, Shotl is currently deployed in 22 different locations. Good. Sorry, I had a problem with the visualization. We are always solving the problem of the lack of mobility in low density areas. Our vision is to help transportation operators provide demand-responsive mobility in more places and to connect neighborhoods, towns, villages, corporations to major transportation networks, and helping us all become less dependent or less car dependent as our future demands. So to make this happen in a cost-efficient way, we are already deploying autonomous vehicles in the city of Helsinki in cooperation with the Finnish manufacturer Sensible 4 as part of the European project Fabulous. Now, at Shotl, we imagine that the cities of the future will be full of life, as quiet and clean as they have been during the lockdown, but more vital, active, and safe that they have ever been before, as we want to help cities become 100% carbon neutral by 2030. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gérard. I'm going to invite Bertrand on stage.
Thank you, and I think that was an excellent introduction to what I will also discuss. Maybe I'll start briefly by introducing VIA. VIA, as let's say, there are 3 important things to remember. We are a solution, so I think Gérard touched a few of the use cases. We are designed to power all mobility solution. So we do software and Turkey, so we provide infrastructure, but we also operate sometimes for different cities or public transit operators around the world. We design and integrate at a very local level. I think we're convinced that mobility is a very local phenomenon, and that it requires a local response. But we of course develop solutions across the globe, and I think all of these will feed into each other. And I think we spend a lot of our energy to optimize the algorithm and to make sure that everything that we have is as accurate as possible, but also the experience and the customer being, for us, not only the person that is going on board, but also all the operators and everybody in the back office to make sure that they have the easiest experience possible. Maybe just some numbers. So we were born in 2012. We have rapidly evolved. We have now roughly 70 million rides in our algorithm that makes it every day a bit more accurate, a bit more precise. In the guiding solutions, we have 700 employees and a team of 300 engineers, which helps us to develop really customized solution, as I was mentioning before. And we have right now 115 partnerships in 22 countries. We operate with big companies like Daimler. We operate with big operators like Arriva or Keolis. We have also big cities as customers. We're present in Dubai, New York, Los Angeles, Berlin, so all the major cities in the world. That's enough. Maybe if you have more questions about VIA, you can I can give the same offer as the 2 previous speakers that we can connect after. But maybe what I wanted to discuss today is a bit. I think we have, and I hope everybody is safe in this call. We've had an extraordinary couple month with the COVID crisis that is definitely not over. And there are three challenges today in the wake of COVID. The first one is that there's a strong drop in demand. Most of the network probably see maybe 20-30% of capacity. It's a combination of the impact of people working at home, the economy still being in a slow state, but also a lack of trust. I think people right now, there was a lot of bad press around public transportation, the fact that it was dangerous. I think there are some first numbers that are going now in Japan and France where you see that actually it's not dangerous to travel on public transportation, but there's still, so that's the challenge that all the cities and PTAs have. There's uncertainty for the next months. How will the pandemic evolve? Is there going to be available funding? There's a big funding gap for many cities around the world. So how can you be flexible? How can you react quickly? And how can you optimize resource allocation? And then maybe the day after tomorrow, there will be big shifts in where people work, in how people travel, and how people go out. So I think there are bigger changes that are coming, and there will be definitely the need for new solutions. So, and if we consider, because it's the topic of today, what is generally speaking, independent of the crisis, what are the strengths of on-demand transit? The first one is the quality of service. You're offering more flexibility to users. You allow them to kind of customize their mobility and to get closer to maybe a more individual mode of transportation versus just traveling to a place, traveling with many other people. This is a more personalized experience of public transportation. It's efficient. You have a better match between offer and demand. You're not following a fixed schedule that was somehow planned based on data, but you're reacting in real time to how many people are wanting to move from A to B. So you're sure you're not having empty buses running around versus overcrowded buses. You can really allocate capacity at its best, and as a result also optimize the cost. And also it's very flexible and adapt. You can react within minutes to events, to maybe traffic jams building up, to a spike in demand, or so you don't have to communicate and have this very old way of announcing ride plans and schedules and timetables. You can just have also a direct connection with the users. So what does it mean today in our current context? What I think some of the strengths that I just mentioned, you can adjust the supply very easily. You can adjust the service zone, the trips, the available destination. You can adjust the service of quality almost overnight. You can manage capacity, which I think will be as the next months evolve, and we're all wishing very, very strongly that the second wave doesn't come. But you can react if you need to have like local confinement, reduce the capacity, ensure that you don't have more than so and so many people on board a vehicle. And that can be used for the shuttles that I was describing, but also for bigger fixed line buses. And you have this permanent communication with your riders. You can enforce, you can reassure them, you can offer them new options, you can remind them of how they should behave on board, wear the mask, respect some social distancing. And finally, you have all of that data to understand the service, the evolution, what you need to do if there is any adaptation. So it makes the whole experience, it's more reassuring for the customer on one end, and on the other hand, for the operators, it's a better way, it's more efficient. You can probably save some cost in the coming months. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of things we've seen across the globe, across the 100 partners that we have. The first one is a solution that we've put in place with 2 large cities, one on the West Coast in the US and one metropolis in the Middle East, where we can use that technology to actually manage capacity on board. So people will be able to see when the next bus is coming, to actually book their seat on board, to make sure that there's only the right number of people on board.
For the drivers, it helps them to just be focusing on driving the bus. There's no necessary intervention. They don't have to kind of look in the rear mirror the whole time if everything is going well on board. And for the operators, it gives them more visibility, real-time tracking. They can anticipate demand. They can put more buses if they see there's a spike in demand to kind of react and make sure that you're still managing the capacity on board. But they can also reduce it if sometimes they see, okay, there's actually not so many people that are actually traveling tonight. So that's the first use case of the technology. And you can have so you see on the right the different elements. I think you see your ride plan, you see the algorithm showing you where is the demand, and it's a very convenient experience and very reassuring for the users. So that's the first aspect that I was discussing, which is around the quality of the experience and the managing this new reality that we live in. I think it's a second one, and I was mentioning the questions around funding, and I think we'll see it in France. Some of the operators started saying that there's a gap of 4 billion euro in funding right now that they would need to kind of recover. We all know that public mobility is often has to be subsidized, and there's a strong pressure on cost. So what we did with our partner in the UK. We replaced all fixed line buses with on-demand service to reduce the cost and without sacrificing the quality of service. So we actually reduced the waiting time from around an hour, depending on the line, 30 minutes to an hour, to actually an average 10 minutes. The rides were all rated 5 out of 5 by the clients. But what we managed, we reduced the hours driven by more than 50%, which has a tremendous impact we all know that one of the bigger cost block for an operator is the driver and the vans and the cost of having them out there. So we reduced it, and I think it's a nice combination of where technology can play a role to, on one hand, offer a better quality of service, and at the end of the day, help operators move their resources more efficiently. And maybe a larger perspective and a broader perspective, which this is a service we have in Berlin, where we're running together with the BVG. So the BVG is the public operator in Berlin. We have 150 vehicles on demand. It's a fully integrated service with the public transportation network. So you're able to book it from the different apps. You can actually all of the payments, etc. Everything is integrated. And when you have a bit of this larger vision of thinking about the day after tomorrow, how do we make sure that people don't come back to using their own cars? How do we make sure we offer a public transportation that is attractive while we are here with a transport that doesn't cannibalize the existing lines? So it's only providing as a complement service for some, maybe holes in the public transportation network that are not so well covered, or for people that would like to have a bit of more comfort or a bit more of an individual experience without going to their private car or without having some mobility that would be just for them. It's fully electric. It's eco-friendly. It's innovative. It's improving the image of the public transport operator. We have 97% satisfaction. We have 8 people out of 10 are recommending the service to their friends. So it's a really positive image, and it will help in the coming months to actually promote public transportation. It's efficient. It's wheelchair accessible. So it also offers for people that are traveling in a wheelchair to just book a ride and have the same experience of mobility as any other person. And what we've seen, BCG has actually done a study around this. I would actually recommend you. I can share the link after in the chat. This is actually reducing carbon emission by 30%, and it's actually reducing the traffic in Berlin. So I think there's a strong case for moving resources to on demand, and I think what I would urge every city or every operator is to keep that speed that we have seen and how we reacted to that crisis. There were many creative solutions that were put in place, and I think it's an opportunity to rethink. It's an opportunity to work between public and private companies. To actually build those solutions together and to keep that speed that we had in the past. So I think it doesn't need to take so long. I think sometimes when we talk about mobility project, it's a timeline of years. Actually, we have launched some of those services within 1 or 2 weeks. We have that possibility to put it extremely quickly in place. It's very asset light. You put a bit of tech, you have your drivers, you get some vehicle, whether it's existing vehicles. We're quite agnostic on what type of vehicles you could use. Within a couple of months, you can also redesign some of the network, cut some of the existing line, improve the quality of service. And then generally speaking, I think in the longer run, to still keep that kind of a timeline, you can integrate it, you can do mass integration, you can have all of those public transportation, thinking together. I don't think I want to have people thinking about on-demand transit as something kind of separate and that will be, parked somewhere in the city. I think it has to be integrated. It has to communicate with the other apps of the operator. So I think it's the right time to, as a conclusion, it's the right time to introduce on-demand. It will bring quality of service. It will bring some savings, and it will bring a quality of service that will attract people to come back to public transportation, which we're rooting for.
Thank you, Bertrand, for exploring new challenges linked to COVID. A few questions came up, but I suggest we're going to address those questions at the end of the session so our 3 speakers could answer to it. Amir, please, if you want to come on stage. Thank you very much.
Hi, now I got it. Hi, so thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today. I'm Amir Shehadeh from Ioki, and basically I'm going to talk to you about how we believe that the first and last mile problem can be solved from our end. So I'm going to be focusing more on a data-driven approach in this context rather than the application one. But just to give you an idea, so basically just as my colleagues had just also said, we all have the same objective. The objective is really to reduce the amount of cars on the streets and basically increase the utilization of the public transport network. Because that's what we're all aiming at, is in the long run, of course, to go sure that our streets basically have a highly efficient public transport system that both in urban and rural areas, and that we don't have to rely on using our cars, as Gérard, for example, well said, in order to get from point A to point B. Now, on-demand systems or DRT systems, they can be a fantastic complement to the public transport system. However, this is the case if we're actually deeply integrated into it. So basically, most of the people nowadays, they use their own cars, and I believe with COVID, this is going to increase even more. And the public transport utilization is relatively low and has become even lower. Now, what we have to believe, or what we believe, is that, of course, by individualizing the public transport experience, actually, and by having a deep integration into the public transport network, we can actually incentivize and increase significantly the utilization of the public transport system, both in the mid and long run. Now, this is basically a visualization which says exactly that. A deep integration allows to basically fill existing capacities which aren't being utilized at the moment. Now, this can be for public transport systems in large cities, in rural areas. This is the same case for example, employee shuttles. So basically everywhere where there's the possibility of actually increasing the efficiency, this is where a DRT system, on-demand systems, really find the ideal fit. Now, just to give you an idea how we think the solution comes, so we at Ioki, we're a subsidiary of Deutsche Bahn, which is Germany's largest public transport company and Europe's as well, which gives us multiple significant advantages. One of them, of course, being that we have a very good understanding of how the public transport system actually works, how mobility as such works, because we, of course, have a long history within that area. But also, and this more specifically, this is what I will address today, is the strategic traffic planning experience which we have. So going into detail here, we have the mobility analytics and consulting field. We have the on-demand platform and services, that's basically DRT, and we operate in the field of autonomous driving. Today, I'm going to focus more on the mobility analytics approach, which basically is a step before actually implementing a project, Because the question is always, well, what's the business case behind it? How many people will we move? Well, there are ways of actually knowing all of this in advance, so that then when one does a project, it actually has the highest possible and best possible results. So mobility analytics for every situation, exactly. So initially we launched mobility analytics as a complement to the DRT systems, because of course, when approaching different cities, etc., parties, companies, they asked us, well, how many vehicles do we need? How many people are going to use the system? What's going to be the cost behind it? A significant set of different questions. And what should be the service design? And of course, one has to answer these questions in advance, because in order to actually launch an efficient and successful project, these have to be known in advance because of business cases based on it. And so we launched this very successfully and then kept expanding and broadening the area. And now what we can do is basically we analyze the public transport system in the first step as a whole. So basically we can take all of the existing data, make different simulations of the mobility demand, understand what the accessibility of the public transport network is, make significant visualizations, and make it possible to actually, on the first hand, of course, understand what is the current status quo. Because without knowing what the status quo is, we can't actually go to the next step. Then, in the second step, and this is quite important, we help you in actually identifying solutions and how the solution can be deeply integrated, of course, also into the public transport network in order to bring the most advantages. So this is a highly data-driven process where we basically determine what the current modal split is of mobility as a whole. So let's take an example of a city, for example. We understand what's the utilization of the buses, of the trains, bicycle, of car, of etc. And since we have many different solutions out there, we have the possibility to here determine what the impact of each of these solutions will be on the entire modal split. So what will actually be the impact of the introduction of a DRT system, of an on-demand system? How is that actually going to affect the public transport network? Is that lead to an increase, to a decrease, etc.? And of course, also what are going to be all the environmental aspects? So this is very important because this guarantees that with every project that we do, or with every project that you do also, you actually have the best possible results. Then clearly, we help in planning new mobility services. This can be an on-demand service, but mobility is not only about DRT, it's not only about on-demand services. So if you want to launch any other kind of on-demand services, we can also do the simulations for you, help you planning these mobility services so that you always have the best possible results, because this is really what we're looking for, having efficient mobility. And as a final step, of course, we also can help planning urban and regional infrastructure projects. So basically, this could be all around smart grids, etc. Now, bringing this to the topic of DRT, if we want to, for example, launch a new DRT project in any given location, if we choose to do a mobility analysis in advance, what we can do is, in the first step, we can understand and simulate the entire mobility behavior. So this is not a supply-driven simulation, but rather demand. We understand what is the actual demand. And then based on that, we can kind of determine, well, what is the availability for this demand in all of the different regions? So where are there weak spots also, of course, in the public transport network? And this all will help us to, in a third step, then identify the areas for the best possible areas for the mobility offerings. So let's say you have a large city. There are many different areas where one can launch a project, and they all have different needs, all have different requirements. There's no case which is identical to another one. And it's really important to here always be able to determine and evaluate one against the other. Then we also help with entire product definition. So how many vehicles, what's going to be the costs, what are going to be the service hours, what's the waiting times in average, and how do certain changes to these KPIs or to the service levels, how do they actually affect the rest of the projects? And of course, the economic viability. So this can't be left out, economic and environmental also. Here I will give you an example of a case study. The video unfortunately doesn't show but basically we did a case study of an employee DRT shuttle. So what we did for this company is we took a sample day with over 300 rides, and these were between multiple different locations, the central station and the airport. And so basically this company already has a lot of different vehicles operating. In this case, we took 7 of these, and we wanted to analyze, is it possible to reduce the amount of vehicles that they're operating by introducing a DRT. So basically the video would have actually now shown a simulation of the entire rides basically within the area and how they would have been shuttled by the DRT service. What we found, and this was quite interesting, quite exciting also for the company, of course, in this sample of 7 buses, we were actually able to do the same with 4 vehicles and still having an average waiting time, for example, of only 12 minutes, whereas beforehand, since it was an hourly service, waiting times were up to an hour and a waiting time of maximum 30 minutes for 96%. So basically, with 4 vehicles, they're able to provide now the same and actually much better service to their passengers, which are both their employees and their guests, at a significantly lower cost. Now, of course, here comes the question, what is the best way to move? Does one reduce the amount of vehicles, or does one maintain the same amount of vehicles, so the same fleet, and increase the utilization of this service? Great thing here is that, of course, with less resources, it can be significantly more efficient, and they can have more passengers. Next step here is, of course, that the entire service, and this was very fortunate for us, so the company then also chose that the entire service will become an on-demand service. And also, for example, shuttles between different cities during the previously idle times, where the bus would basically move people from point A to point B. Now they actually transform during the waiting times and become a DRT service in the area, and in the evening they can shuttle back. And so we're really happy about this. We're going to actually be transforming the entire existing service here in Germany. That as an example, I will gladly give you more details on the mobility analytics in the next talk. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Then I can give you more examples and also, of course, show you the video, which is missing in this case. Very briefly only, just to give you an insight also into our system, since I think it's important. Basically, it's a passenger-facing app, it's a driver-facing app, and there's an operator tool. The passenger app is very lean, it's very efficient, and very customer-friendly, of course, fully accessible. And you can make bookings which are immediate into the future, and you can also make arrival-based bookings, which is very important, especially for the deep integration into the public transport network. Then, of course, there's a driver app, and there's an operating tool, which allows you to basically understand real-time what the entire monitoring is. So the entire positioning of the vehicles, and you can basically track a bunch of different KPIs and see if there's any issues, and then you can, of course, interact immediately. Just to give an example, so for us, it's also important, again, as mentioned, we're a white label solution. And for this reason, we don't want to be perceived as a competition or as an alternative public transport. We're a complement to public transport. We work deeply with them. And so also in our appearance, of course, it's key to us that we don't appear as Ioki, but we appear as maybe, for example, Arriva Click or here at Landbus, or also, for example, for the telecom employee shuttle, which we operate in Germany, and many other cases. Here, I'll just give 2 more examples of projects. This will be one in the countryside and one in the larger city. This is a small dial bus service, which we have in a small town called Wittlich in Germany. And basically what we did is we digitalized it. So we made the whole service on demand and fully barrier-free. And also, surprisingly, up to 60 passengers. So this fits very good to the first case we heard today. And the great thing about this project was that within 6 months, we managed to increase the passenger number by 400%. So this was really fantastic. The mayor was really, really happy about the results, and basically it just keeps growing from there. So that's very, very good. That really means that one can actually bring significant added value with on-demand services, also especially in the countryside where the need is, of course, much higher. And another one project that I'll just briefly mention is the project that we have in Hamburg with the VHH, which is one of our lighthouse projects. So also here we have a 24/7 service with fully electric vehicles, which are barrier-free. So we recognize them, they're like the London taxis. And it's also integrated into the HVV tariff system. We did a significant mobility analysis for the city of Hamburg in the past, which basically determined where to launch all of our different DRT systems. And now step for step, we're realizing this. So Lurup, Ostdorf, and Billbrook have been determined due to the mobility analysis, which we performed also, identifying what the best possible locations are for launching this type of a project with the highest success rate. And over 50% of our passengers use it to get to and from public transport stations. So this is really important. This is fantastic because it really highlights the deep integration into the public transport network, because it means that now people, sorry, I didn't mention, these are all suburban regions. It's not downtown Hamburg. Why? Because in downtown Hamburg, the public transport system works highly efficiently. So this is in the suburbs where there's a certain lack, and we want that the people don't go downtown by car, but rather leave their cars parked and use the first mile, last mile solution to get to the public transport system and then go into the city. And this is exactly what happens. So now a significant part of the population in these areas actually use the public transport system rather than their own cars to go downtown, maybe for work, for shopping, whichever. As you can see, there's also a very high user rating. So it's a highly appreciated system, and the passenger retention is very high at over 75%. This project is really very, very, well, we've been very happy about it. And for it also last year, we won the German Mobility Award 2019. So together with the VHH in Hamburg and us, we won it for the deep integration into the public transport system and for how a DRT system can actually add significant value to the lives of the population. I'd be more than happy, so this is the end of my presentation, but I thank you very much, and I'd be very happy, so reach out to me at any point of time. I'll gladly take you more into details on it. And now we look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amir. I would like to thank you all because we really had a complementary approach on demand responsive transit with different use cases. And I would like to raise one question which was quite frequent. You precise, of course, that demand responsive transit is quite flexible as it has to be convenient. But Alstom and Transdev asked the following question: how to implement a demand responsive transport without forcing passengers to book in advance? I don't know if one of you want to take the lead and tackle the question.
Well, I can actually take this because it fits very well to a project which we're realizing at this very moment. Exactly. So this is definitely a point that we have the classical bus approach where people can enter at any point of time at the stop whenever the bus stops there. And then we have the other extreme, which is the on-demand system, where you have to make an app booking, because otherwise, even if the vehicle is there, you can't enter. So in one of the projects that we're realizing at this very moment, we realized that it does require an intermediate in this case. And this was also needed for the use case, because over 80% of the passengers that of the current service, they go ad hoc. So they book, they just enter the vehicle, whereas the other passengers book by app. And so we also have the capability in our case. For example, we developed an ad hoc booking feature, basically. So you can just go to the vehicle and basically there the driver can just create the booking for you. So he will immediately, because you can see there are seats available, of course, if the priority will always be given to the passenger, which has booked by app. But at the same time, you can also go to a free vehicle if it's parked. So in this scenario, for example, it always will park at the train station at a given point of time when the train stops there, because it's in the rural area. And then you can enter and simply go to your destination. So this is kind of a hybrid approach, which brings significant value here. I hope this answers it.
we'll have some time to take one more question. I'm really sorry if it's a bit frustrating for our audience. I would like to ask you, yes, for your relationship with the PTA, what is the best way to convince the PTA to try the service? It is clear that COVID opened the way to this type of service, which is more flexible, more convenient, but what is the best way to convince them to use a TOD system?
Maybe I'll take that one. And I think that there were also a few questions around the cost around such a funding. I think in the past there's been a lot of discussion on the cost of DRT, and I think those were mainly services that were at the end of the network that were quite expensive to operate. And I think if you now use technology, you can actually, if you have this dynamic DRT as opposed to the more classical DRT, you can have economics that are improved. I think a classical way would of course to do an experimentation, to do a pilot. Sometimes it's also the best way to just not start everything, but just to actually take an implementation on the zone, try it for a fixed amount of time, and kind of see. Most of the time, the results are in there. I think we've seen from the different deployments that you can very, very quickly. I think what we deployed in Kent, it was 2 months ago, and I think we already see the response from the users, the positive returns. The improvement you have to the economics. So it's most of the time an experimentation is a good approach. You could of course do some scoping and consulting. That's also another way to just kind of take a longer process of the discussion. But most of the time we tend to believe that and it's very easy. As I said, it's very easy to start. You need a couple of vehicles, you need a couple of drivers. You'll put the tech and the start can be quick. So I would always recommend to actually have a live experimentation. And most of the time, those experimentations, in our experience, are actually renewed and expanded. So,
just very quick, if I could just add on to this, I fully agree. So it's exactly that, a pilot case. Another possibility, and this kind of in the complement, would be to do a previous mobility analysis, because basically at a fraction of the pilot cost, you can actually simulate the entire scenario and have a very good understanding of how it's actually going to, or what the results of the project are actually going to be before having spent a single cent into the project itself, into actually realizing basically getting the vehicles and everything. You can basically simulate everything at a fraction of the cost, and then you know exactly what the business case is.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you three, and I'm so sorry for the question we do not have the time to tackle for now. I will give you, of course, the email of our speakers if you want to continue the dialogue. So I really want to thank you. Unfortunately, we can't clap on live stream, so I really want to send you some clap. And I suggest we can continue this event for Mobility Club members on another link. Just to remind you, the Mobility Club was created 1 year ago by Shehadeh. It's a private club dedicated to global mobility player to build a strong network of partners. So we're going to continue this event on a Zoom link to exchange in small committees. So really thank you to all three for the very good presentation, for your adaptability also as we move. It's the third time we move the events, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
See you on Zoom.
All right.